The African sun was setting behind the golden hills when David first heard the desperate roars echoing across the savannah. He had been working as a wildlife photographer for 15 years, but something about this sound made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't the usual call of a hunting lion or the territorial warning he knew so well. This was different. This was pain. David grabbed his camera bag and water bottle, quickly checking his radio to make sure it was working. The sound came, again, weaker this time, from somewhere near the dried riverbed about half a mile away. He had been staying at the small research camp for 3 weeks now, documenting the daily life of the local lion pride. But today felt different. Today, something was terribly wrong. As he walked through the tall grass, the evening breeze carried more sounds toward him, low whimpers, heavy breathing, and then silence. David's steps quickened. In all his years in the wild, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now every fiber in his body was telling him that a life was hanging in the balance. When he reached the top of a small hill overlooking the riverbed, David stopped, dead in his tracks. Below him, trapped between 2 large rocks near what used to be the water's edge, was a magnificent lioness. But she wasn't alone. Even from this distance, David could see that she was heavily pregnant, and something was very wrong. Her hind legs seemed caught, and she was lying on her side, breathing heavily. David's mind raced. He knew the dangers of approaching a wild lion, especially an injured and pregnant one, but he also knew that without help, both the mother and her unborn cubs would die. He reached for his radio to call the research station, but when he pressed the button, only static came through. The radio was dead. Looking at the lioness again, David noticed something that made his stomach turn. There was blood on the rocks around her, and one of her back legs was bent at an unnatural angle. She must have fallen while trying to reach the small puddle of water that remained in the riverbed. Now she was stuck, too weak to free herself. The photographer in David wanted to capture this moment, but the human in him knew there was only one choice to make. He had to help her, even if it meant putting his own life at risk. As he started walking down the hill toward the lioness, he whispered a small prayer and hoped that his years of experience with these magnificent creatures would guide him through what was about to happen. The lioness saw him coming and tried to lift her head, letting out a weak growl. But David could see in her eyes that she was too exhausted to be truly aggressive. She was fighting just to stay alive. David stopped about 20 feet away and slowly sat down on the ground, making himself appear smaller and less threatening. He spoke to her in soft, gentle tones, the same way he had seen local rangers calm frightened animals. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "I'm here to help you. I know you're scared, but I won't hurt you." For several minutes, David just sat there talking to the lioness, letting her get used to his presence. Slowly, her breathing became less panicked. Her golden eyes, though still watchful, seemed to show a glimmer of understanding. It was as if she somehow knew that this strange human meant her no harm. David carefully moved closer, inch by inch. When he was finally close enough to see the full extent of her injuries, his heart broke. Her back leg was indeed broken, and she had several deep cuts from trying to escape the sharp rocks. But worse than that, David could see that she was in labor. The stress and pain of being trapped had triggered the birth of her cubs. Without thinking about his own safety, David knew he had to act fast. He had helped deliver farm animals back home in his younger days, and while a lioness was certainly different from a cow or horse, the basic principles were the same. The first cub was already starting to emerge, but the mother was too weak to help the process along. As gently as possible, David positioned himself where he could assist. The lioness looked at him with what seemed like gratitude in her eyes, too exhausted to resist. Over the next hour, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, David helped bring 3 tiny lion cubs into the world. Each one was perfect, small and wet and crying for their mother, but David's relief was short-lived. As he was cleaning the 3rd cub with his shirt, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Low growls, coming from multiple directions. He looked up to see yellow eyes reflecting the moonlight from the hills around the riverbed. The lioness's pride had found them. One by one, 5 adult lions emerged from the shadows and began walking down toward the riverbed. David's hands began to shake. He was trapped between the rocks with an injured lioness and her newborn cubs, and now her family had arrived. In the wild, male lions were known to be unpredictable, and David had no way of knowing if they would see him as a threat to be eliminated, or recognize that he had just saved their pride member. The largest male, clearly the leader of the pride, approached first. His massive frame and thick mane made him look like something from a nature documentary. David tried to remain calm, but his heart was pounding so hard he was sure the lions could hear it. He slowly moved away from the mother and cubs, trying to give the pride space to reunite, but something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking, the large male lion stopped a few feet away and looked directly into David's eyes. For what felt like an eternity, they stared at each other. Then, the lion looked at the exhausted mother and her 3 cubs. Then, back at David. It was as if he was putting the pieces together, understanding what had happened. The other lions slowly approached, each one studying the scene with intelligent eyes. David watched in amazement as they seemed to communicate with each other through subtle sounds and body language. The mother lioness, despite her pain and exhaustion, managed to lift her head and make a soft rumbling sound toward the pride. It was as if she was telling them what David had done for her and her babies. What happened next would stay with David for the rest of his life. The large male lion walked slowly toward him, and David prepared for the worst. But instead of attacking, the magnificent creature did something that defied everything David thought he knew about wild animals. The lion gently pressed his massive head against David's shoulder, a gesture so tender and full of gratitude that David felt tears streaming down his face. One by one, the other lions approached and did the same thing. Each one seemed to be thanking him in their own way. The females nuzzled the newborn cubs, and the younger males kept watch over the group. It was like being accepted into the most exclusive family in the world, but David knew that the mother lioness still needed help. Her broken leg required medical attention, and she was losing blood from her wounds. Using his satellite phone, which thankfully had a weak signal, David managed to contact the wildlife rescue team at the main reserve headquarters. He explained the situation, and they promised to send a veterinarian and rescue team at first light. Throughout the long night, David stayed with the lion pride. The other lions had brought meat for the new mother, and they all took turns keeping watch over the cubs. David found himself in the middle of one of nature's most beautiful moments, witnessing the bonds of family that transcended species. As dawn broke over the savannah, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, David heard the sound of vehicles approaching. The rescue team had arrived, led by Dr. Sarah Chen, a veterinarian who specialized in large African cats. She was amazed to find David sitting peacefully among the lions, all of them resting together like an extended family. In 20 years of wildlife rescue, Dr. Chen whispered as she prepared her equipment, "I have never seen anything like this. These lions trust you completely. The rescue operation was delicate, but the pride seemed to understand that these humans were there to help. They moved back to give the veterinarian space to work, but never went far. David helped translate the lions' behavior for the rescue team. Having learned to read their moods and signals during his long night with them, Dr. Chen was able to set the mother's broken leg and treat her wounds. She also gave the cubs a quick health check and declared them strong and healthy. The mother would need several weeks to recover, but she would survive, and her cubs would thrive. As the rescue team prepared to transport the mother lioness to a temporary recovery facility, something incredible happened. The large male lion approached David one final time and, in a gesture that made everyone present hold their breath, he gently licked David's hand. It was a goodbye, a thank you, and a promise all rolled into one. The mother lioness was taken to the wildlife hospital, where she recovered over the following weeks. Her cubs, who had been bottle-fed and cared for by the rescue team, grew stronger every day. David visited them regularly, documenting their progress with his camera and sharing their story with the world. If you're watching this story unfold, you're witnessing something truly magical. These moments remind us why we must protect these incredible creatures and their habitats. Please share this story with others who love wildlife as much as we do. 6 weeks later, David received the call he had been waiting for. Dr. Chen informed him that the mother lioness was ready to be returned to the wild, and her cubs were old enough to survive on their own. The reunion was planned for the same riverbed where everything had begun. When the day came, David joined the rescue team as they transported the recovered lioness and her cubs back to their home. The pride had remained in the area, almost as if they were waiting for their family to return. As the transport cages were opened, David watched with a heart full of joy as the mother was reunited with her pride. The cubs, now strong and playful, immediately began exploring their new world under the watchful eyes of their family. The other lions welcomed them with gentle nuzzles and protective postures. But the most touching moment came when the large male lion, the one who had first acknowledged David's help, approached the cubs and began grooming them with the tenderness of a father. As David watched this beautiful reunion, he realized that this experience had changed him forever. He had always loved wildlife, but now he understood something deeper about the connections that exist between all living things. He had witnessed kindness, gratitude, and love in their purest forms, coming from creatures that many people still saw as nothing more than dangerous predators. The pride settled back into their routine, but David noticed that whenever he visited the area in the months that followed, the lions would acknowledge his presence with subtle nods and calm body language. It was as if he had become an honorary member of their extended family, a human who had proven that not all of his species were to be feared. David's photographs and videos of the rescue became famous around the world, inspiring millions of people to support wildlife conservation efforts. He used his platform to educate others about the intelligence and emotional depth of lions, challenging the stereotypes that had led to their declining populations. But more than the fame or recognition, David treasured the quiet moments when he would return to that riverbed and remember the night that changed everything. He would often sit on the same hill where he first heard the lioness's cries, thinking about the trust that had been placed in him and the responsibility that came with it. The 3 cubs grew into beautiful, healthy lions, each one carrying the spirit of survival and the legacy of that miraculous night. They became symbols of hope in a world where human-wildlife conflict was often seen as inevitable. Their story proved that when we approach nature with respect and compassion, incredible things can happen. Years later, when David would tell this story to young photographers and wildlife enthusiasts, he would always end with the same message: animals are not so different from us. They feel fear, pain, gratitude, and love. They form families and take care of each other. The only difference is that they do it without words, which sometimes makes their actions even more powerful than ours. As the sun set over the African savanna one last time in our story, David sat watching the pride in the distance. The mother, Lioness, was healthy and strong, her cubs now subadults, beginning to find their place in the world. The large male still led the pride with wisdom and strength, and occasionally, when the wind was just right, David could swear he heard a soft rumble of acknowledgement carried across the grassland. This is more than just a story about a man and some lions. It's a story about compassion crossing species, about trust being built in the most unlikely circumstances, and about the incredible things that can happen when we choose to help instead of harm. It's a reminder that we are all connected in this vast web of life, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply extend a helping hand to another living creature in need. Thank you for staying with us through this incredible journey. Stories like this remind us why wildlife conservation matters, and why every single life, whether human or animal, has value and deserves protection. In a world that can sometimes feel divided, these moments of connection give us hope for a future where all species can thrive together.